This conference will now be recorded.
Oh, that's a good one.
Well, my clock says 6 o'clock, so I'd like to call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Templin,
Here.
Manson, Lane,
Here.
Huggins, Milburn,
Here.
Maddock,
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like Commissioner Manson is absent today.
Thank you. Item 3, general business. A, approve planning commission agenda. Anyone have any corrections or additions to add to the agenda tonight? Take off?
Make a motion, we approve the agenda.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Agenda's approved. Item 3B, approve the minutes of the planning commission meeting held on April 23rd, 2024. Any additions or corrections that you saw to the minutes?
Chairman, under 5C,
It says that Chairman Timblin left the room at 6 PM. I think that probably needs to be updated.
Oh, that's true.
I don't know what time that is, but
Probably
it wasn't 6 PM.
probably 6:25 or so.
I'll rewatch the video. It's the only thing I saw.
Thank you. Any objection to that modification?
Nope.
Any other changes or additions? Motion?
Make a motion, we approve the minutes as discussed.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes have been approved. Item 3D, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Anyone have anything to disclose tonight?
Yeah, I would have to excuse myself from item 7B, Chairman Timblin.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Item 3D is disclosure of outside communications regarding commission business. Okay. Item 4, call to the public. Members of the public who wish to address the planning commission regarding items not on the agenda may do so at this time. Any presentation is for informational purposes only. No action will be taken. There's a 4-minute time limit. If you'd like to address the commission, please come to the podium, give us your name and address. I'm assuming we have no one online?
No one online.
All right. That ends the call to the public, which I think moves us to new business. Item 7A, consider site plan for Evergy Atlantic Substation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did also want to point out that Commissioner Mattson did email Mike and myself saying he wasn't going to be here, so it wasn't just a no-show, so.
Just blow us off. Okay.
All right, thank you. This is item 7A, consider a site plan for Evergy Atlantic Substation. You know, we talked about the Pacific Substation probably about a year or so ago. This one is about 1.5 miles south of the Pacific Substation, and it is in a very rural area of the Sunflower Astra development. Really kind of struggled with this a little bit. We do have some requirements for, obviously, for site plans, the landscape restoration plan, a lot of those types of things. But talking with the applicant, and they are here tonight, so, and they would like to address the planning commission, have a brief presentation after I give you the staff report. So we went back and forth on several things and have concluded, or at least staff's opinion is that there aren't any new trees that'll be planted around the substation itself. It's still fairly around the very far perimeter of the lease site. There will be some native vegetation that'll remain. They will reseed the areas that are being graded out to level out the transmission area itself. And they will be tall native grasses. I did call and talk with the Johnson County Extension Office about the seeding rate and best way to make sure that the seed takes. Those are included in your recommendations. So there won't any, their staff is recommending no trees on the site being planted by the applicant. Additionally, they do have a fairly tightly woven chain link type fence around the substation itself. So while it does obscure the view of the equipment, but it is not opaque in any stretch of the imagination, but it does provide some relief. The other thing about this site, as I'd mentioned, it is 1.5 miles south of the Panasonic site, and there's no public roads that go to this location. There will be a gravel road for Evergy access to this site. There won't be any full-time employees. There's no near-term development on this area. And then if you recall, the solar farm discussion we had, that area is pretty much all south of this location. So you do have a site plan in your packet. There isn't a whole lot of detail in the site plan because we're not really requiring a whole lot of things. Photometric plan's not needed. There's no public access to this site. No additional stormwater is needed because the equipment, there's no buildings or anything, any structures on it other than the transmission items themselves. So with that, I will stand for any questions you may have, and Evergy representatives are here and they would like to address the planning commission.
Questions for Brett?
And that, maybe Mike, if you could scroll through, look at some of the pictures that were included towards the end of the staff report, just to show the fencing material. And so you can see that, yeah, you can see through it, but it is a pretty tightly woven pattern and it does obscure the view, but it is certainly a transmission distribution center with tall structures that'll be running through there. So
I guess one question I do have, Brad, is say in your conclusion under number 2 that when this does develop, a landscape plan will be reviewed, will be required, I guess. Will that landscape plan come back to planning commission or is that staff approval?
yeah, I guess it would probably have to come back to planning commission. Now, who knows what's going to happen?
Yep.
Part of the reason we don't have a real good idea what we want with that landscaping plan is we don't know where there might be an arterial cutting through there. There might not be one within a quarter mile of this location. So that really is yet to be determined. We do have on our future land use plan some suggested routes, but you know, there's a lot of coordination with Johnson County Parks, City of DeSoto. You know, a lot of things still have to happen before any kind of arterial road comes through there. So at this point, it's one of those things when you can see on the map there still is a lot of vegetation outside of the disturbed area that will help also obscure, block the location to the site. So it really just doesn't make a lot of sense to require a lot of plantings or screenings when we just don't know what could happen out there.
None of the other east-west roads are labeled here. How far down is this? Is it like 127th or? Do you have a feel for where this is in relation to the existing road?
It's at the northern part of the substation, or pardon me, it's about 119th Street, right around there. It is, so 103rd, 2 miles south roughly, is the 115th, 119th area. And this, like I said, there's such a gap between the edge of, and then you've got Kill Creek Park running right through there. I don't know if you could zoom in a little bit, Mike, on the.
Yeah, no, I want to get 119th is essentially the north line is 119th.
And 119th is basically.
115.
Okay, so 119th is not a viable option for future expansion into the park because of Kill Creek Lake, correct?
Correct.
So 115th is the most likely one that we would be able to do. This one aligns with 115th Street?
Yeah, it'll be 115. Just for clarity, the city has entered into a multi-party study that includes Johnson County and KDOT to establish these logical routes from an engineering standpoint of east-west connectors through this site. So we don't know exactly where that, but we can look at a map like you and tell that 119th is blocked by that park.
Right.
You know,
Nobody's
so
gonna
I have seen ideas.
Put a bridge over the lake. That's not gonna happen.
Right. I've seen ideas that do follow the 115th Street alignment. That takes 119th Street and then angles up as you head east through the site, angles up to 115th as a logical connection there. But again,
But just for clarity, we're talking about what would essentially align with 115th Street.
yes, the north line is essentially 115th. Now, correct me if I'm, is that correct?
It's north, yeah, you're north.
Yeah.
It's just a little south of that.
It would be right.
You're right.
I'm curious as to why that location as opposed to someplace further south or north. Why at that spot?
You may address that now, or like.
I'd love to hear.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead.
Jessica Keck with Evergy, 818 South Kansas Avenue, and I'll address your question first and then get in the presentation. Will that work?
Sure.
Whenever we entered into this agreement with the parties, it's because of all the development that they're trying to do around the area. This was the most logical location. The terrain, we had that actually pushed a little farther, but the terrain, it drops off really, really severely the farther east you go. So it makes sense for it to be in that location with everything else they were planning on doing at the time whenever we put our substation, picked our substation site. So that's kind of the negotiation between both parties is where it ended up.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll just go into, this is a quick presentation. I was here probably about a month ago for the rezone, so I think you've seen most of this, but we'll go through it again. Go to the next slide. We're proposing to construct the new Atlantic substation on the property located on the old Sunflower plant. It will facilitate the industrial and commercial growth in the nearby area. Go to the next slide. Like we'd mentioned earlier, this location was picked mainly on this one, probably the topography of the area and then what's going on surrounding area. We don't put in floodplains either. There's a little pond and wetland area to the south, and there's also that stream to the east, so we had to stay out of that as well. So logical place for it. There wasn't really a flat area on here anyway, so this was close to what we needed. There wasn't ideal, but it worked with everything that was going on there. Go to the next. Site plan, like Brad had mentioned, we have some taller plantings on the north side. We don't suggest trees. We have transmission lines coming out, and I'll show you in a slide here in a little bit. There's transmission lines coming out on the north and then heading west. You can't put trees under transmission lines. They're just going to get cleared out anyway. And then we have some just regular reseeding on the other sides, and then all the trees on the perimeter are there now. And as far as we're concerned, they're staying. I don't know what's going on in the area anytime soon. We drove all around the site. It's pretty obscured because of the trees and the landscaping that's currently there. And like I said, I'll show you in a little bit the transmission lines that kind of hinder what we can and can't do in this area. And then there's a picture of the mesh fence that Brad showed earlier as well. I was out there actually a couple days ago doing something for the transmission line work. So this is actually on the site. The first picture is looking north from sitting in the substation site, and those trees. Most of those are going to stay. We actually had some tree clearing to get access to our proposed transmission line so we could drive through it. So those trees were not cleared because of that, even though we'd already cleared some of our transmission line is what I was getting at. So there's still trees there. The other one's facing east. There's trees all along the east side as well. The next slide. And then south and west as well. It's pretty treed over right now. I honestly drove up there and I wasn't exactly 100% sure where I was going, and I might have missed my substation site, which is embarrassing considering it's 30 acres and it's flat. So next slide. And this is just an example of our transmission line easements. It's north is facing, I don't know, right on this one. So all the transmission lines coming out of that north side make it pretty impossible to put tall trees and vegetation along there. So like Brad had mentioned, our compromise was the taller native grasses along there to help with that. And then all the rest of the yellow lines are just all the other transmission line corridors that we have coming in. So just a blown out picture of what we're kind of doing in the area. Next slide. And this is, so actually, if you want to back up probably 3 slides, I'll tell you when. Okay, there. The yellow roads is our proposed access coming into the site. The north one will tie into Stringtown. And then that southwest road is going to tie into the west. We'll build a road out to tie into an existing road on the plant property. And we're working with the city right now to design the road with specs that they would agree with. So that's what the last slide was. Just kind of our typical road spec on that. And then, like I said, we're working with the city to make sure that what we build works for the area. And then, I believe, questions. Yes, sir.
Go back to the drawing with the red line around the
Uh-huh.
right there. So we're looking at a red line there. Is that the 53 acres?
That's the entire easement. That includes some of our working area and grading area. The substation is 1,100 by 1,300, which is about 32 acres. I believe the easement's about 50 acres, yes.
So you do have an easement going down to this property too already?
Going down,
Accessing this property?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So this is the Atlantic, and then the Pacific is just east of
North.
Panasonic? Okay, north
Oh,
of
Panasonic, it's east of Panasonic, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, and then
North
the
of
other one, I
site.
can't remember, what's the one just south of 10? West of
Clearview?
Sunflower.
The one that you can see off
Yeah.
of K10, that's
Yeah.
Clearview Substation.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask it, I know I've probably asked this twice now.
That's all right.
But are these substations, will they help the city of DeSoto with power outages? Because, I mean, literally, I bet you my power has flickered on a day like this. And it's a pain.
It should because we're improving the infrastructure in the
Okay.
entire area, so yes.
Is that one of the reasons why there has been, we've had more power outages in the last 6 months than we ever have?
I would, and I, don't quote me on this, I could imagine it's probably because of all the work that we're doing in the area, that if we have to take a line down to rebuild one, we're not gonna have as much redundancy. So when it's all said and done, we hope that goes away, yes.
And these roads you're talking about building, are they an aggregate surface or paving?
They'll have an aggregate surface, yes.
And they're gonna be private?
The ones into our substation, yes. We'll tie into like Stringtown, but once we get off of Stringtown or off of the road to the west, then yeah, they'll be private roads.
And this road to the west? I'm sorry.
It's tied into what is now a private road on the, what is Sunflower Mission. So they're not platted yet.
Yeah.
So what are those roads being built for? Like, well, I know what your access road
Right.
is for, but the one to the west.
The one to the west is one that's currently existing there now, on Sunflower property. So we're just tying into that one at this point, and I think we have an access easement with Sunflower, I believe, to get from that location, and then we'll have the easement to get into our substation.
I assume these access easements are legally described and filed with court.
Yes.
These exclusive easements that you'll be getting?
You're going to ask me real estate questions? I know whatever we get to get into our substation, because our substation equipment is extremely important for us to get access to 24/7, 365. Whatever we get is going to give us that access 24/7, 365. So it's got to be, if you call it exclusive, it's going to,
By exclusive, I mean you're the only ones that have the right to use that route.
the one that we're building coming off of the private road, yes. As well as the one coming off north, off of Stringtown. That's going to be our specific road. So yeah, it would be exclusive access easement.
To the point where you
Tie into, yeah. Any more questions?
If you would go to the slide where it has your transmission lines, just for the record, are the lines that we're talking about going out of the north from there
Yeah.
the same types of poles that you've taken down 95th Street?
Coming out of the north will be 115. I don't know if it's double circuit. The ones coming down 95th Street, the big ones that you're talking about, they're double circuit, bundled wire, so they're heavy poles. I don't know for certain. I think the one coming out on the north side and heading west is going to be double circuit. It will be double circuit till it ventures off to the north again, and then it'll be single circuit on that side. So the ones coming out and running west will probably be the big steel ones. I don't know how big. They're not completely designed yet. I don't know if they're going to be as robust as the ones that went down 95th Street, I believe.
Okay.
Are all these lines proposed at this time? Or are there some of these future? Or,
They're proposed, yes.
I mean, are you pursuing construction of these at this time?
We're pursuing the the easements and we're not actually actively constructing them yet. We're working on the permitting and the easements and all the stuff to actually construct them, yes.
As soon as you can get them up, you're good.
We have to be able to supply power to the area, so, yeah. And we don't typically show our transmission lines, but it kind of explains why we can't put trees around the area, so I wanted to throw it in there just to explain why we're kind of hindered on this site.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is not a public hearing, but the matter is before the commission. Any discussion, further questions?
I do have one more question. Do you anticipate that this will be the last substation you need?
Asking the hard questions.
Sorry.
It honestly depends on what's developed in the area. I mean, if we have something developed in the area that requires more capacity than what these substations can do, then we'll have to do another one. So it's whatever their plans are, we have to be able to meet. At this point, this is what we
Supply
know.
and demand, basically.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
Dang
since
it.
you're on the subject, most of these warehouses are pulling like 4,000 amps in each one of them, right? Have you planned for all of that?
We have planned for what's currently been proposed.
Okay.
And I think there might be a little extra capacity at the Atlantic, but don't quote me on that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I'll at least say, I think what I said at the rezoning too, that it does trouble me that this is located essentially where we most likely would want to have some sort of an arterial, and certainly the north-south of the current alignment of Stringline Road, or, yeah, Stringtown Road. I mean, it certainly seems like we're creating kind of a doorstop there, but if that's the only place they could put it and we need the power, I understand it's not our job to negotiate that, but it does trouble me. And, you know, add to that the site plan really doesn't have any projected buffering of what may be along an alignment that may be an arterial into that site. I think someday we may regret that.
A little closer clarification. So the substation essentially is here, where can you see the cursor? That's the site,
Okay.
roughly. So it does kind of roughly align with where that. You wouldn't be able to build a road through here.
No.
So the layouts I've seen have this road. This is 115, coming in, getting on the property, angling in some manner down to 115.
Okay.
But again, this board hasn't seen any of those layouts.
No,
We've got
I get it.
Land use plan that has some generalities about land use, but we've not established, defined future corridors through that.
I mean, I guess I will say, you know, the buffering plan we always ask for. I mean, I've already forgot the name of the substation on Sunflower Road, but I mean, is it going to look just like that? Pretty close.
Like the existing one?
Yeah, the existing one on Sunflower, just south of
Oh.
10.
It's not gonna look anything like that.
It's not going to look anything like that.
Okay.
No, that one's got the masonry wall, it's got landscape.
Yeah, but I'm talking like the
Poles and everything's gonna.
Oh,
Oh,
Yeah.
the infrastructure on
Yeah.
the inside, yeah.
Okay.
It's 115 and.
okay.
Silly question, but transmission lines, do they have extra capacity? Like, barring this, she asked the question about substations. Do the transmission lines have extra capacity already built into them for future expansion?
Well, that's a hard one.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd have to, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, you have to do substation, but I don't think you have to
The obvious reason why I'm asking is because most of us agree that it's kind of an eyesore, so we'd like to avoid that if we can.
I don't think we're speaking for ourselves, but I think we're speaking for these
Yeah.
people in the town that aren't very happy about it.
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah. Unrelated question, but are any of the lines coming down on 95th since they put up those large ones?
Oh, are they removing any?
There's 3 separate sets of poles on 95th right now.
So.
Sorry.
If I remember, because I did the permitting on that one, don't yell at me. That one replaces the existing 115 kV line that was there, which is why it's double circuited and it's moved over. So the existing 115 poles that are along there should either, I don't know if they have distribution underbuild because I can't remember, either be topped or removed whenever that 115 is placed into service. I don't remember if there's distribution underbuild, and I don't remember if the new poles, I think they had distribution underbuild on them, so hopefully you'd be able to remove that existing one along the road.
So by topped, what is topped?
If they have distribution on them, you would take the top part off and leave the distribution side of the pole, so you make them shorter.
Okay.
I think the new circuit, I think it has distribution underbuild, so we should be able to move it over. Not saying all the distribution lines would be taken away, but that 115 line, I believe what we did on 95th Street replaced the 115 line that was existing there. So it should. It's been a hot minute since I've done that one, though.
Understand the planning is very far removed from the construction
Well,
and
and
execution.
there's been a million projects in between, so it's remembering the minute
I just thought
details
I
of
would
it.
ask
Yeah.
'cause
No.
there's one on the north and two on the north and one on the south right now on 95th.
Well, and it's trying to remember what's distribution or what's transmission on there. So I that's where my brain's trying to go, is this transmission or is this distribution? But I'm pretty sure that what we did was I know it was a transmission line, but I think it had underbuild. So something should go away. That should have been communicated with the landowners on that project, so I'm hoping it was, and I don't want to say something that was, so I'm going to throw that out there.
You brought up a point. Sorry.
That's fine.
Can we build these lines so that they will accommodate more? You said you weren't sure about that, but that way could maybe possible another substation be eliminated if we built in some room for the other ones to already grow a little bit?
And that's what what we have there is what we need for what's currently done. And I think you would have to go up in voltage to like a 345, which is what we have coming in from the south. I believe the 115 is robust enough, but it depends on what they're putting in. If they put in another mega factory, we're going to have to put another substation in to support that. If they don't, then we probably have enough infrastructure currently for what was planned. And then maybe a little extra. I think the Atlantic substation has a little bit extra room in it and capacity in it, but it kind of depends. I mean, if the Chiefs come, we're going to have to build a new substation. I mean, so some of those.
I think we could stand for that.
Yeah, I would be okay with that.
Extra 3 billion laying around, you're gonna put that for that?
Tax abatements, I don't know.
Stop. Let's not go there. Okay, let's go.
These new poles you're putting up, do you allow others, utilities to use those poles?
We have connections like for fiber, for internet and stuff like that on our poles, yes. And distribution should be ours. I believe we serve this area, so distribution should be ours. But fiber and telecom and stuff like that, we have agreements with them where they add on to our poles. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Wait till she sits down.
I know, let me sit down first.
That's just me.
Sorry.
Further discussion?
Well, I guess I'm of the opinion that, the bottom line is we expect Evergy to provide the power we need, and they're gonna have to tell us how they have to do it, so I would be in support of this.
Yeah, I agree. I'd like to make a motion to approve item 7A, consider site plan for Evergy Atlantic Substation as submitted
With the conditions from the report.
with the conditions from the report.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Templin,
Yes.
Milburn,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Item 7B, consider site plan for custom foods, and I note that Commissioner Milburn is up with it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Site plan for custom foods was actually brought before the Planning Commission in late 2020 and was approved. But due to delays in the project, in fact, they didn't start at all. I think they did do some grading, some site development work, but their time frame has expired with the site plan. So bringing this back for Planning Commission review, nothing's really changed at all. Joe has reviewed the public utility plans and has provided comments to the applicant. No additional stormwater, photometric plan, all the landscaping items that we would typically require. This is the exact same plan that was brought forward to the Planning Commission. The only thing is, Joe's opinion was the cul-de-sac at the end of now 90th Street was not necessary because it just is, it's a warehouse. If there's any need for fire engines or emergency services, they can get to the site. The cul-de-sac bowl, but really didn't serve much of a purpose. And I have talked with the applicant about extending that 90th Street. They've got some ideas for moving forward with additional development and didn't want to go to the expense of adding the cul-de-sac bulb. So Joe agreed with that. But everything that we required in the previous approval in 2020 is included in this site plan itself. So I just wanted to bring forward that this is really a perfunctory step to have it re-evaluated by the Planning Commission. It continually meets our standards. The lighting plan is appropriate for this. The architectural standards do have, differences of colors and shapes on each side, and the landscape plan meets our requirements. The area is all M1, so there isn't required buffering that we would normally require between different zoning districts. So with that, I would recommend to approve the site plan as presented. I will stand for any questions from the Planning Commission.
Custom foods, I assume this will be a refrigerated or frozen warehouse?
That I don't know. No, Matt, did you want to, or, all right. Okay.
Any questions for Brad?
Brad, I don't know if this is in your wheelhouse or not, but I'm a little surprised that this is the 28th February in this, in one area. Can expect it to be 36 or maybe 4. I'm not familiar with standards for service roads or.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I can really, off the top of my head, remember that either. Obviously, it's not it won't connect. This isn't a road that'll connect through to another property. But yeah, let me see if I can look up the specs on the width there.
Are you,
I don't remember a specific discussion about that last time.
I'm assuming you're planning on pulling trucks. Are you planning on pulling trucks through that planned road, or are you going to bring them in through the bottom of the drawing there, since the dock doors are on the bottom there?
My understanding is they're going to come in off of 90th Street in Commerce and then pull back.
Okay.
Yeah, because there won't be any connection to any of the properties to the south, even though the trash compactor and that is down there. Any vehicular traffic other than the trash truck won't head farther south than.
But the dedication of the 90th Street as a public street,
And that actually has occurred, so I do apologize for that. That has happened. So it used to be called Mr. Good Sense Drive, but when we approved the site plan, the easements and the right-of-way has been dedicated to the city and is now 90th Street. So that, I should have taken that line out of the staff report.
I'm assuming if we accepted it as public right-of-way, that it's at least been constructed to city standard. Maybe that's the wrong assumption.
So I'm just looking up the standard for street width, and industrial/commercial collector allows street width, 2 traffic lanes, 12 feet each. So it does, those specs do allow a road of this.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Brad? It's just I forget things from time to time, or I get confused because my frame of reference is over a very long period here. But do we have the glass area on the building? My recollection is we took a lot of that out. We don't have those requirements anymore.
I'm like you, my frame of reference.
Because I remember when Engineer Air did their deal, we had kind of a big knockdown drag out about it. They put a bunch of false glass on there to kind of deal with it, but I think we changed it after that.
Yeah, we did, and that was with the Flint development when we updated our architectural standards and just made it more, I guess, general in the fact that there needed to be relief of the building, there needed to be different colors, different differentiations to help define entryways and corners of the building, but we didn't go with a hard, you must have, 15% glass and
Yeah, I think we got
12%
rid of a
masonry.
lot of that. But I'm just, it is stark that there's so little to break up the walls on at least the west elevation, which is looking at the creek, so I guess I understand why you wouldn't put a lot on it, but I guess if you're saying it's okay with the standards.
Yeah, it is, and I guess the other thing that makes this one a little unique is these standards, I mean, as I'd mentioned, the whole area is zoned M1, so we don't have all the sort of buffering and it won't be visible from the road. It's actually even tucked behind the existing building itself. So there's just a lot of, I guess, nuance on this one that it's not, and because it's an addition, if it were a standalone building and we're right up front of Commerce Drive, we'd probably have some additional, well, there'd be a lot more landscaping for sure.
I guess that's my question is, I'm assuming our architectural guidelines aren't dependent upon being located behind another building. So I'm guessing if our architectural standards, if this meets those, I'm surprised by it.
Well, just an observation, if it's a frozen or refrigerated warehouse, it wouldn't have windows because it's all insulated. So I don't know if that has anything to do with the code or not.
I would assume it probably doesn't.
Well, if you'd like, we could go back to the applicant, if you choose to table this and ask them to, we can take a harder look at those architectural features on this, because it was approved prior to our reducing some of those, I guess, hard line requirements. And I think maybe that's part of the reason why. And I will be honest with you, I didn't look at them as close because we'd already approved this, and the, the applicant's, been a longstanding member of this community, so we did sort of push this forward a little bit. But you're right, there could probably be some more additional breakup, especially in that center section. As you can see on that west elevation, there can be some differentiation of some colors and some paneling through there.
If somebody proposed this that fronted Commerce Drive,
No.
I'd like to be able to say something about it. I mean, if our requirements have become so lax that we couldn't mention that anymore, that troubles me. This particular use, because of its location and whatnot, I totally get why that may make sense. But I'd like to make sure that it's comports with our guidelines. And if not, we can at least identify it as.
And really, the north elevation would be the one as it faces the street, which would need most of the attention.
Right.
And there is some landscaping along there, but not much, because once again, it's all, the landscape buffer that we would typically require between different zoning districts does not exist here.
So again, I'm sorry, Chair, looking up the architectural regulations, you might remember, some of them are prescriptive. They say you have to have a certain percentage. Others are subjective. But for the prescriptive ones, talking about minimum exterior building materials in this zoning district, indicates that the facade, the facade facing the street shall 30% of it shall consist of one or more following masonry, brick, and stucco or glass. So most of this is stucco. The cream color there is stucco. I imagine that checks the box for that.
Okay.
There's also a more subjective requirement in here about overly long horizontal facades having to have variations in wall articulation every 100 feet. And so it doesn't talk about whether that facade is along the street or not. So the north elevation here, what is the dimensions on the building? Can't remember. Obviously, the north and south might be close to 100 feet, but the east and west elevations are the long side of the building here. So that's kind of some of the more subjective. Looks like it's 100 by 200. So, but there's no prescriptive thou shall in the long facade discussion. So again, I don't specifically remember an in-depth discussion about the architectural details the first time through of this, but I don't think those particular standards, the building material standards, I don't think that changed recently. I think it was the same back then.
With the location of this one, if this were visible, I would be upset with it, but with this tucked back behind the other building and the landscaping back there.
My concern is not necessarily that this is inappropriate at this location. It's just that as a body, do we have the ability to even raise it as an issue? If we've given ourselves such broad criteria, maybe we ought to be thinking about that again. Because if this was facing the street, I think I would definitely have a different reaction to it.
Oh, so would I.
Yeah, and as I indicated, some of the more subjective requirements would allow you the latitude to do that.
Okay.
It allows a decision like, well, this one is okay because where it is, but the next one wouldn't be because, it's more prominent.
Well, I would like to at least have some finding along those lines that because of the location of this particular building in relation to the road and the existing buildings there, we're comfortable with this as opposed to, it meets the design guidelines, check.
Well, I'm just wondering, Mr. Chairman, if you'd like, I mean, you could approve it with some conditions that we get some additional landscaping or go back to the owner's representative about that north elevation, since it does face public right of way.
That'd be nice.
'Cause that middle area of that west elevation is, and like Mike said, I mean, yeah, it's stucco. It's more of a stone-ish masonry kind of product, but it is a vast expanse, which we do try to avoid those, whether it's, it could be all masonry, it would still look like a big,
Box.
I like that plan, Brad. What do you think?
I certainly have no reason to require the applicant to put a bunch of plantings that nobody's ever going to see. So if it's something that we think may be necessary to make it work, that's great, but
Well, not on the back side, but on the side that's gonna be visible. Additional.
the side that faces
Drawing
the
number
streets, the north
3.
elevation,
Number 3.
It'd be the north side.
Scroll down just a little bit, Mike. It's the one with the 6 windows. That's your north.
Maybe some additional landscaping might take care of it.
yeah, maybe just additional landscaping, especially in that center area.
I think that could take care of it myself.
okay? Any other comments, concerns? Thank you, Brad. This again is not a public hearing, so the matter is before the commission. Any further discussion, motions?
I'm good with it, with the stipulations, because we basically approved it 4 years ago.
Right.
Was that your motion?
I would make the motion that we approve the site plans for the custom foods building with the conditions stipulated in our discussion.
I'll second.
Comfortable with that? Any further discussion? Roll call?
Templin,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Huggins,
Yes.
Maddock,
Yes.
Schultz.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome back, Commissioner Milburn.
Thank you.
Item 7C, discuss an SUP for a concrete batch plant near Panasonic.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've had an application from Geiger Concrete. We began discussions with them about special use permit in March, and they are currently have a temporary batch plant as part of the Panasonic construction that's going on there now. They're not using public roads. They have a direct connection to the Panasonic site, and as I mentioned, it's built as a temporary batch plant, but they would like to, at times, they have capacity when different operations are going on at Panasonic to be able to sell concrete to the areas in and around DeSoto. And to do that, they'd have to have a special use permit. Because one thing that's challenging about this project is when you go look at our requirements for a special use permit, we have a lot of items that we would typically require. However, when you go and look at that site, it is a construction zone. I mean, it is heavy equipment everywhere. It is graded out. I mean, it would not make a lot of sense, at least in my opinion, to require landscaping plan, photometrics, all these things when it's all lit up. There's activity going on all the time. And one thing to the applicant's credit, they did apply for a 3-year application. So it's not something that they're wanting to do, for 15 or 20 years. So it is a short-term application, but it does give them some flexibility to, when Panasonic isn't requiring heavy loads of concrete being delivered, they can sell concrete to the public or in the areas around DeSoto. So with that, the only thing that we really came up with that we thought was important, and speaking with Mike and Joe about the access point, they would be using typically gate number 4, and there are some pictures in the staff report that do show the areas that they would, that's the routes that they would be using from their project location. You can see right now they just head north in the Panasonic site on the east side of the water towers, but to sell outside of and deliver into the areas around DeSoto, they would have to head onto Astor Parkway and then head north. And so right now, this is the entrance, ingress and egress point that they would be using at gate 4, and then they would be turning northbound on Astor Parkway. This is the current condition of Astor Parkway. Now, it did rain, obviously, when I was out there that day. And so then there's some additional pictures of just the site itself. So you can see, it's a total construction zone. There's a lot of activity. There's no residences that will be affected or anything along those lines. So a lot of the things that, as I said, we would normally go through with a special use permit just didn't seem to make a lot of sense, especially in lieu of the fact that they are only asking for a 3-year special use permit. They've also have some operational hours that they have suggested that I did include in the recommendation, but also things about the safety concerns. They're working with Panasonic and also Turner Yates, the general contractor, for safety concerns for the employees and all those things that we'd previously talked about, the special use permit, wanting to make sure we had potable water for eye rinsing stations. All those things are already part of this operation, even though it's quote unquote a temporary batch plant that's out there at this time. So with that, the only thing that we really pushed back on the applicant was a $10,000 annual fee to go to our road maintenance fund. Because right now, this Astor Parkway down to near the water plant is public right-of-way at this point. It has been platted and dedicated to the city. So when we talked to Evergy about their project beforehand, that's still on Astra's property. Those are all private roads, but this is now a public road that they would be using, and felt that the annual $10,000 was something that we would be using to repair the roads, take care of it, and to the interim for the next 3 years. And then when they go through the process, if they so choose to find a more permanent location, then we would kick in with all the items that we would typically require for an intense use like a concrete batch plant. Representatives for Geiger Concrete are here tonight, and I would like to give them, Mr. Chairman, at your discretion, the opportunity to present their information. But this is kind of where we're at right now, and I just wanted to bring it up as a discussion item, have the public hearing potentially next month. I wanted to hear any questions, comments, concerns the Planning Commission may have, but also for the applicant to hear those questions and comments as well. So with that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Questions for Brad?
What are the hours of operation you guys are planning for?
Right here, well, it's in item 3, I said limit operations, but those are their terms, 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and then basically a half day on Saturday.
Okay.
Brad, who was the concrete supplier over here on 83rd? We went through that special use permit. Was that Penny's?
No, that was Ham.
Ham. Okay, so what's their annual contribution to road maintenance? Is that 10,000?
Well, they don't have an annual contribution to road. They do pay 10,000 to the Parks and Rec Fund, and that was a fee that's, I guess, due to their sort of location along the Kansas River. But they're also, the requirement we have there was they're building the turn lanes, they're paving Gardner Road, and then they still maintain the section north of their gates up to, I guess, the city of Olathe's line plant or water distribution areas up there.
Yeah, I mean, they went through a lot of stuff. They did traffic study, a lot of stuff to get approval, that special use
Yeah,
permit.
they had to
too.
do a noise analysis, if you recall all that, and public involvement plan and a lot of things. Now, once again, they're a little different because they're a mine and a quarry and a batch plant. This is just the batch plant, so the requirements aren't quite as significant as we would have for,
Locations are quite different too.
yes, absolutely. Yeah, the activity, the whole, it's a complete 180 as far as different areas, different use, distance to residents, environmental areas, all those types of things are completely different in this scenario. I guess the other thing I might add is the quarry, the Martin Marietta quarry pays the city $14,000 a year for their access onto 95th Street, which we do maintain.
So then after 3 years, they're not going to submit another application? It'll be done?
They'll either be done or they'll have to submit another location for a permanent site.
And then we'll get all the
Yes,
said
and then we'll
noise and
jump a lot deeper into the weeds on it.
Is there any limitation on the working hours now for that plant?
I don't believe there are, no. Now, they may have, and I'll let you all speak to that, but I don't, at one time
Plant right now
Panasonic was
just-
operating 24/7, but I think they've
Plant
worked,
right now just services the construction that's on site.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's different.
So we could expect it to be operating the same schedule as it is now.
Pretty much, yes. And this could be, the one that we approved with Ham, they had to go through a lot of, upgrades to the road, all those types of things, and they can start pretty quickly because they're already operating as a concrete batch plant, but they're only have one customer, and that's Panasonic.
But Astor Parkway is improved considerably compared to 83rd Street.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Well, I'm just wondering how you would administer these conditions for the plant. You don't say you would.
Well, I guess that's where we came up with the lump sum payment is,
No, I'm
oh,
talking
okay,
about the hours of operation.
okay.
I mean, if they're sending trucks out at 4 a.m., that's probably the way you'd come out as an issue.
Assume
Start complaining somewhere, so.
you're just looking to fill gaps in time to make sure that you're operationally efficient, I imagine. Is there a number that you're kind of anticipating, being able to fill in gaps with as a percent like of total batch capacity?
I'm sorry, this is a
Yeah.
question for the applicant. If you
Yeah,
wouldn't
why
mind,
don't
Yeah,
you?
sorry.
approach the
come up.
podium so we can make it part of the record.
You want to go ahead and answer.
Provide us a name and an address.
Todd Geiger and 4318 Speaker Road, Kansas City. To answer you, that's hard to give a black and white because it's just based on the demand that our customers would have. Today, Panasonic started off extremely busy. In the past 6 months, it's been a little slower. So I would say the plant is about 50% capacity. So our primary focus would continue to be Panasonic, but we would have some room to try to supply the customers that are calling us.
Makes sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant before you sit down? Thank you. So this is not an action item, it's just a discussion. The special use permit has to go through the golden criteria, just like a rezoning does. I see that the applicant took the time to go through the golden criteria, it looks like.
Yes, they did.
Which was nice. I mean, in my mind, it's different than a special use permit that's someplace that's surrounded by other uses other than a giant construction site. Totally understand why that would be a little easier to address in light of the fact that it's imposition upon the neighbors or the road system or anything else. It's a little different question. I think for me personally, the 3 years sounds appropriate. We can reevaluate it in 3 years and kind of decide whether that's still an appropriate place for this to be happening. By 3 years, hopefully Panasonic would be operational at that point, we kind of get a better feel for what the traffic's like on Astor Parkway and whether we ought to be doing batch concrete there in the parking lot. That's my 2 cents.
I mean, I agree with you on that, but I also want to have a level playing field for everybody else that submits a special use permit for concrete batch plant. You know, if they got to go through all that work, I understand it's a different scenario out there. But in 3 years, you know, if everything's still booming and buildings are still being built, you know, when you come back in 3 years, you know, I hate to say, you're going to have to submit, you know, the level playing field.
Yep.
So that's my concern.
Sorry, did the applicant want to address that?
We've got a couple comments if it's
Sure.
appropriate at this point.
Again, your name and address.
You bet. My name's Chad Tenpenny, and I live at 5004 West 131st Street in Leawood, Kansas. And thank you, Mr. Chairman. I serve as the general counsel for Geiger Ready Mix, and my connection to DeSoto and the sunflower ammo plant goes back to at least the early 2000s when I served as state director and then eventually chief of staff for Senator Roberts. And he was a key person in the transfer of that site from the Army to the developer and the community. And I don't know if Senator Roberts and the community leaders at that time would have envisioned a huge Panasonic battery plant, but certainly we appreciate all that you have done to make that dream come true and make it a fair situation and respectful of everyone's rights out there. But definitely support Brad's description of the situation and that it is a construction site out there. I would like to underscore that there is a lot of coming demand in the DeSoto area for concrete. It's a bit of a concrete desert by our analysis. Delivery times are essential in the ready-mix business. Currently, Geiger has the ability to supply, let's say, K10 and Lexington location, something that's going on there from our Olathe plant, but it's going to take 25 or 30 minutes, and that's kind of on the outside of what's economically feasible. If we adjust that and transport directly from the Astra Park site, that reduces delivery times, it lowers cost, and maybe more importantly, it accelerates some construction timelines. The city's comprehensive plan, mentions more housing, more retail, sidewalks, bike trails, et cetera. We see this as contributing to that. And we absolutely acknowledge that and understand a more permanent location that we would need to go through these additional requirements. We understand that totally. And we're asking you to simply approve a permit for actions that are already largely occurring. Before I close, I'd like to introduce or recognize Jay Healy with GBA, and then introduce Todd Geiger a little more formally. He employs 250 people in this community. He spent his whole life in the construction industry, has a strong reputation. I know he'd like to say a couple words about partnering with this community and his vision for the long term.
Thank you, Chad, and hello again. I would like to answer that question real quickly. We're a fifth-generation, 132-year-old family business that started in Leavenworth, and today we have 5 permanent locations and 2 portable plants throughout the metropolitan area. And Chad did a wonderful job of explaining our intentions, and our long-term goal is to have a permanent spot here. And we've been working with Sunflower Development to try to get to that position, but haven't reached it yet. And that's where we wanted to ask for a temporary special use permit. We do have customers calling from the DeSoto community asking for concrete, and we would like to help them continue to build this community in a responsible way, being close to site here. actually, Mayor Walker has asked us to assist in the disc golf course that's coming up, and we're happy to assist with him and look forward to supporting the city and being a part of the city for a long time to come. So I, in closing, would like to thank you for your service to the community by serving on this board. And if you have any more questions after we went through a couple other things, I'd be happy to answer them for you.
Thank you. So as a discussion item, matters before the planning commission.
Well, my thoughts are kind of, it's in operation now, and it's in a construction area, and they are asking for 3 years because obviously it's a temporary plant now, and I agree with Justin, if it becomes a permanent plant, maybe not on this location, but another location out there, that the same requirements as
Sure.
what we put Ham through would be substantial, but since this is temporary right now, and the location where it is, and, you know, most of the trucks now are going over to Panasonic or possibly other sites on the plant, but there'll be a few coming out. It makes sense to me to have the concrete closer, just for all the housing and what have you that we've got proposed. So I'm good with the stipulations that we've got here for now.
Anybody else?
I mean, I can imagine running like chickens with your heads cut off the first 3 or 4 months to try to keep up with demand, and now you're sitting, spinning up that plant and spinning it down and spinning it back up. It's probably very difficult to be efficient. So I can understand that fact. So I don't have a problem with what they're trying to do.
Brad, does that give you the feedback you need?
Yeah, it sure does, Mr. Chairman.
I kinda
More
like to follow
specific
a
you
little
wanna
bit of
give?
competition between them too.
That's what I was wondering, is the prices, is the
Yeah.
price gonna be all the same or competitive or what?
That couldn't hurt.
Well, that's our job. Okay. With your agreement then, I would suggest move on to item 7D.
Yep.
Yes.
Discuss side yard setbacks in RO, rural subdivision zoning district for accessory buildings. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of discussion items tonight. As you might imagine, this is one we've talked about, I guess, a periphery for many years now, actually. It's come up and just recently we rezoned a tract from RO to R1, and the city council did approve that rezoning. And we did that about a year and a half ago in a subdivision near Waverly and 83rd Street for the same reason, for an accessory building. And one thing about DeSoto's code is we've got some fairly, I guess, favorable language that allows residents to have storage structures. And 1 acre above, you can have a fairly significant size accessory building. And the reason I've got 1,600 square feet is that's what we allow for a 1 acre tract. Now, there can be 2 buildings, you could have 2 800-foot buildings, but it doesn't seem like that doesn't happen very often. When people want an accessory building, they put up a fairly decent-sized building. And what we have run into, and more, I guess Cameron, the building department, is they're the ones that ultimately have to tell somebody no because it doesn't fit on the lot right, the setbacks aren't right, the terrain doesn't allow it, the septic system interferes, and then we get a variance request, and a lot of times that isn't going to work, so then we have a rezoning. And if you look at the zoning map in East DeSoto, there's no appreciable difference between an R1 house and an RO house in many instances. And so this is just something that kind of nags at staff when we have to make these kind of judgments and whether or not we should try to bring forward a variance request to the BZA. And We just felt like this might be an opportunity to bring up the planning commission whether or not we want to try to address this. We can keep going on like we have and just take these on a case-by-case basis. But I did put together a few examples for you to look at. Now, this is in Arcadian subdivision. It's a flat site. As you can see, and I told you Cameron and Dale and Drew, they work with the applicants or the homeowners now about trying to get the lateral fields and the septic tanks off to a side where it's not so much of an issue. So you can see here in this site, it's a little over an acre lot. You can see where the septic system is going, and they could fit a 1,600 square foot building back there, and it really wouldn't be a problem at all. So, but unfortunately, if you go to the next slide, this is in Oak Country. Whoever built their septic and lateral field just dumped it right in the middle of the backyard, and that building wouldn't work. It would be into the lateral field. They'd have to get a variance, or they'd have to tear up their lateral field and redo it. But if you did allow for a larger, that's what the lighter blue line is where the R1 district line would be, or the suggested staff. What we're suggesting is allowable for an accessory building in the RO district. And we're only talking about fixing the RO district because there's no reason to put it in any other district because it already is allowed in the R1. And then finally, this lot here is actually zoned RO, but they came back and did a variance for the accessory building, got it reduced to 25 feet on the side, and then also got a variance for their swimming pool. And this is prior to us addressing the swimming pool issue. Now, fortunately for them, their septic and lateral field are right between the house and the bow of the concrete driveway, so it all kind of fit. But once again, that's a lot that's barely over 1 acre, and you can start to see it's a little filled up at this point. And I guess that's sort of the rub between somebody who's in an R1 district, or a resident in an RO district. Maybe the RO district people want that additional setback because they want to feel a little more remote and have a little more privacy perhaps than somebody in an R1 district. So that's kind of the challenge we have. Do we want to allow something like this, which once again, I say allow something like this. It's not an eyesore by any stretch of the imagination. They went through the variance process. As I recall, the BZA required some architectural features on the accessory building and things like that. Of course, the swimming pool is fenced. There's buffering on the back because the property owner to the back is just, that area is completely a tree thicket. There was no objections at the BZA public hearing. So once again, is this something that we want to take care of at the planning commission level so we don't have to juggle these issues with do you go for a variance, do you go for a rezoning, or you just told, sorry, we can't help you because of issues around the train and I'd mentioned also sometimes whoever the original owner built the house well towards the back of the lot and exceeded the front building setback, or their minimum setback, and now you can't do anything. So there's just a lot of things that come up that bringing this forward to the planning commission to ask your thoughts on, do you want to move forward with a potential text amendment like we did with swimming pools to allow for accessory buildings, a little more leniency so residents can fit those in the RO district.
I personally dislike the idea of having to have people come back and do a rezoning for an accessory building that's gonna encroach the back part of the property that nobody's gonna care about. I think it's silly that we have that. That said, your suggestion of the 15-foot on the side yard, that is a little hard for me to take, just because I live someplace that I don't know that I would want to live next to somebody who's built 15 feet from the property line in my side yard. And that would be objectionable to me.
Me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the side yard is more of an issue than the back, because very few of these subdivisions are constructed so that they're back to back and have back fence lines. Most of them are straight lines or cul-de-sacs and kind of out there. But I think the 15 side yard's a little short for me.
Yeah, so I just submitted for a variance request in Baser for an accessory building. It's for the square footage, but not the setback. And I believe, now don't quote me on this, it's a similar RO type zoning, but the side yard was 25 and the rear was actually 10. So, I mean, to Chairman Timblin's point, you know, if we keep it at the 25 and then reduce the rear setback, I mean,
That would probably have addressed the folks that we've had to do rezonings for, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I would say it would help quite a bit. It certainly would on that instance that I showed you, or yeah, the last one there, Mike. Because they could, you know, that one does meet the 25 side yard setback.
Yeah, can you imagine if that was 15 though? I mean,
But
that'd be way over
It's-
there.
It's much more of an urban feel than rural.
is there a 1600, is there, can you go larger square footage on the lot, or is 1600 the max?
No, it's actually proportional. You can go up if you've got 2 acres, and I don't remember the exact number, but I think you can go up to around 2,000 square feet.
Okay.
It's sort of
The guy
goes
across
up.
the street from me's got 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, so it does depend on the size of your lot. So the minimum
Or not, but he's got it.
or the maximum you can put up on a 1 acre lot is 1,600 square feet. But most people look at that and say, well, I've got, you know, 1.8 acres, so I can do a 1,900 square foot building or something along those lines, whatever that ratio is.
But I like the idea of addressing it. I think it's silly to have people come back in and do a pocket rezone for one lot just because they want to.
Yeah, and we've done a couple of those, and it just feels kind of wrong to have all this RO and then a little dot of R1. And once again, it doesn't make a bit of difference on the use and what the landowner's going to do or anything like that, but it just seems like it's a spot rezoning, and it's, you know, going back to graduate school, that's just a no-no. You just don't do those things if you can avoid it. So it's kind of planning 101, but, you know, that's.
Well, more importantly, it makes them go through the hoops and spend the time and the money to go through the rezoning, which seems silly to make people do that unless you just want them to hate your government, which we could probably do better at that.
Well, exactly. And then it does give us a little bit more, it gives city staff clarity saying, yes, you can do this. And yeah, you can still apply for a variance, but I think it gives us a little harder edge to say, nope, we've already gone through, we've met with the planning commission, gone through the city council, we've made an adjustment. You can still have a variance, but you won't get a favorable staff report for the BZA. And I think in most cases, you know, other than the ones where the lateral field or whatever is just completely in a bad spot, you can find a way around it. Or, you know, they might have to make their building a little smaller.
Speaking from experience, though, we allowed somebody, they got the okay to put their building closer to the property line, which we allowed. Little did we know that they were going to put a huge sound system in that garage, and we can hear it, the whole everything, in our bedroom at night at 1 o'clock in the morning. It's pretty frustrating. So, no, I can actually tell you the songs.
Oh, really?
Lyrics to the song. That's what a speaker system he's got in there. So, I'm not inclined to shorten those up. Sorry.
On the rear or the side, or both?
Our lot's laid out really weird. Definitely I don't want the side, and I just soon not reduce.
So Brad, on those examples that you did show, did they meet that 30-foot setback on the rear? If we would have had that approved? I mean, I guess you kind of, those are hypothetical, I guess.
Yeah, those are, but
So then I guess the variance request that you have, would a 30-foot have worked to get around the variance request? That you remember off the top of your head?
yeah, I believe it would if we reduced that rear yard setback, because I think on the, no, actually, I know, on the accessory building was 25 feet, and they wanted 25 feet for the back. Now, they didn't, because 50, it would have been a 50-foot, it was 50 foot in the rear, they wanted 25 feet on both sides. Now, they didn't have to ask for the side, because they met that one. But the swimming pool all would have, at the time, it was a 50-foot rear yard setback, so that swimming pool would have had to have been 20 feet closer to fit. And so if you would have just reduced the rear yard to 15 or 20 feet or whatever number, that would have made a big difference for they would not have had to go through a variance process.
Well, I'm curious on the rezonings we have approved, whether or not if we just had changed the rear setback, would that have been sufficient to avoid having to do a rezon? And then so when you come back to us with this, if we're going to come back with it, let's have an answer to that. Because I think if that would have addressed it, if it's the rear setback that's really kind of the problem, I would be inclined to keep the side the way that it is at 25 feet and just reduce the rear setback.
Okay. All right, I can find that out.
That's my 2 cents. Any other comments? We give you what you needed?
Yes, sir.
I guess I have one question, and I don't have a strong opinion, but it seems to me like a 25-foot rear yard is very typical for this. Is there some kind of planning principle about that would dictate that you maintain that kind of separation in the back?
I don't know if there's I mean, if you can look at zoning regs all over the place, and they're completely different depending on size of structure, size of lot. Yeah, it is built into almost every city's code that there's a rear yard that is applicable for some sort of, lack of a better term, recreational type use for having a single family lot.
Maybe create some separation from, rear's a little more private.
In a lot of development, that's where they bring utilities to the back end.
Yeah, that's true. They take 10 feet, but, they still want you to have.
Yeah, and I will say the Arcadian does have and typically, unlike this one, I know there's a 10-foot utility easement that runs the whole exterior of the property.
Okay.
But we will find out some additional information on some of the issues that people have brought in
Yeah,
building.
I'd hate to do a text amendment that didn't actually fix the problem. So
Well,
let's make sure that this fixes the problem. Okay, I believe that concludes our agenda. Anything else commissioners like to address tonight? Nope. Seeing no one jumping up and down, I would entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
This conference is no longer being recorded.